I'm always interested in how artistic spaces seem to be very uniform in their politics. They seem to have a uniformly left-wing and sort of very sympathetic to identity politics kind of bent. And I've always been curious why that is. For example, why is it that I can go into virtually any museum, any art museum in the city, and I can find work that is anti-capitalist, but I can't find any work that's pro-capitalist? It seems a little weird because I would think there's got to be one artist out there who's pro-capitalism at this museum, but I never do find it. And I'm sort of curious about that. I've been thinking about that for a long time. I think, do you observe that in the fashion world at all? And if so, do you have any idea why that's the case?
Yeah, I think we have, maybe quite paradoxically, we have a really conformist understanding of what it means to be radical, So we see radicalism and rebellion through one lens. And that is generally, quite sympathetic with, so-called marginalized people. And yeah, the idea that capitalism is responsible for every single ill that there is in the world. And I think because fashion and the art world in general sees themselves as subversive, or from a counter-cultural kind of background, it feels like it has a moral obligation to resist, if you like, in a certain way. But I find it very, because you're right, the fashion industry, and to be fair, I do work in the music industry more because I tend to work with musicians more than I work with models and fashion brands. But either way, in both spaces, you're right, there is a very strong left bias. But even with, having a left bias, it just seems like or it just seems as though having a more nuanced take or approach or more complicated way of thinking about certain issues is just really not allowed. I very much think artists, are people who consider themselves to be the good people, and the good people think and behave in a certain way. And that's something I'm interested, like yourself, in thinking about, for one, and challenging maybe.
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's also true that there's a lot of people in artistic spaces that don't agree with, far left orthodoxies. But it's just that they often keep it to themselves. They don't make artwork about it. So it may just not be true that as a whole, the music world or the fashion world or the art world, it has a different political, demographic than the world at large. It's just that people are, if people are afraid to challenge, the idea that a particular minority is oppressed in a political conversation, they're twice as afraid to challenge it if they're an artist who is constantly inhabiting artistic spaces. That's sort of something that I've observed. So it's I think rare to see someone like yourself who is coming from an arts background and who is challenging the idea that, based on what I hear you say, that it's that you can easily divide the world politically into good people and bad people, and the good people are the ones that are focused on, racism and, lifting up intersectional identities and seeing the world as a competition between oppressed groups and oppressor groups. These are a lot of the things that you riff on. And it's just rare to see someone from an art space who believes what you believe, or who's asking the questions at minimum that you're asking, and who also voices them, because it's just, there's very little to be gained if you plan on remaining in the art world. to voicing these things. It seems like it's all downside and no upside if you plan on staying in these spaces. So I'm just sort of speaking from, I think, experience and from knowing people in the music world there, but it's definitely refreshing to see that. And I have to imagine you get a lot of people, I'm curious, do you get a lot of people from the fashion world or from the music world that say privately, I agree with you, but or like, I'm interested in what you're saying, but I don't know how to broach these conversations with my other music or artist friends, or I don't know how to make work about this subject?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm getting it a lot these days, including from celebrities and people who appear to be actually quite, as many would call, woke in some areas, at least very outwardly espousing woke ideas. And they do message me and they tell me that they're interested in the things that I'm saying, or they even agree. But the thing, what's happened, especially in the UK, where there are far fewer voices, let's say, on race, as there are in the US, or at least public voices anyway. And so these people predominantly, let's say, who fall into certain orthodoxies, they want to be good people. And so they've listened. That's the advice that we're told these days. You have to listen to people of color. And they're listening to people of color and they're being told, this is what it is. And under this kind of worldview, you're not meant to question anything. And so when they have seen someone else who shares that identity of those that you're meant to listen to, who is saying something else, I think for them, it's like, I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know this was allowed, Even myself, I think when I first started having certain thoughts, and I think we've had a similar journey in terms of we both at one stage were more sympathetic to the prevailing narratives that we now have. And then when I first started questioning them, even I was like, can I do this? Is this okay? So yeah, I think a lot of people don't even know that it's possible to have another view.